out. Everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Lights Out. You like that?
I like that.
Maybe we just do an ASMR episode where we just whisper, talk about like this. Yeah. Would you guys like that? Yes. I can see a bunch of people right now getting really pissed off. They're like turning their car stereo up. They're like, what the hell, guys? I still can't hear them. They turn the volume up to 100. They still can't. Psych? No. No, we're back, guys. As always, I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your host, Austin.
And I'm the producer, Daniel.
And today we got a real wild one for you. Media dubbed her the Killer Grandma.
Yep.
And Lois Riess is her name. And I feel like all of us at some point during this story will think about somebody who we know that is like Lois in our lives or that we've known. Because this is one of those cases, and we were talking about it before, I was like, her story and this case in general could honestly be adapted into a show.
Yeah, you were kind of comparing it to Breaking Bad. Like the core concept of it is that it's this person who seems fun and loving and kind, and then all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, they do the most horrific things you can imagine.
Turns into a cold-blooded killer.
Yeah.
And everybody's absolutely shocked. They're like, what?
Yeah.
They don't understand why or how. And then obviously once you start peeling back the layers of the family dynamics and the relationships, and you start seeing maybe a little bit of how these things could have happened. But at the same time, you're kind of left with, how did she go? Was she always like this?
Right.
Is this something that developed over time?
Was it a slow descent? Was it a quick descent? Yeah.
You definitely are left with some questions because it's hard to get a read on her.
It is, yeah. And I think, I don't know, we'll get into our takes about her kind of at the end, but she does give me a little bit of a liar. I mean, I think especially when you watch the Max documentary that they had on her, which
I'm
is
not a monster.
Yeah, which is really good. If you're interested in this case at all, you can go see. It's her first and only interview ever on camera. And try to get a read on her a little bit. I think that's what's fascinating about that series. You kind of, she pulls you in a little bit.
Well, she gives you the illusion she's totally normal and doesn't know how this happened. And she's kind of got a little bit of this likable quality to her where you're kind of like, really? She's this dangerous person?
Yeah,
And
she gives off that small town grandma vibe.
She had the U.S. Marshals after her?
Right,
like,
what? Yeah.
I mean, it's a wild, wild story. And, it starts in very relatable, just, Minnesota, just a good Midwestern family. We all know people like this. Our families are like this. And then just things start to unravel. And it's one where the more she does, the worse it gets for herself.
Yeah.
And buckle up for the ride. Because it's a long one, but it's one that I think you will definitely be intrigued by. It's definitely not boring by any means. So we're just going to go ahead and get right into things today because there is a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of family dynamics and sort of, the victims in this case are also extremely important in understanding their backstories and their relationships with Lois Riess. So we're not going to waste any time. And I did want to just say quickly, if you want to watch the video version of us, we are on camera. If you're listening on audio only, maybe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, come over to YouTube. Danny does a ton of editing on the show and post-production, adds a ton of overlay and images and really gives you a great visual experience to go along with, the dazzling audio experience Austin and I give you.
Yeah. And you can see all our ugly mugs, finally. If you ever want to put a voice to the face.
There you go. We're right over at YouTube. You can just search for Lights Out Podcasts or Lights Out and you'll find us. But let's go ahead and get into the story of Lois Riess. Lois Ann Riess. She was born in Rochester, Minnesota on February 28th, 1962, and she was the youngest of 5 children, and her life at home was less than ideal. Her father, William, was an engineer at IBM, or as they called him, IBMers, back in the day, and he was described as an inattentive father. He was rarely home because of issues with his wife, Donna. The couple almost never slept in the same bed for as long as Lois lived at home. Donna was a hoarder who struggled with mental illness, and according to Lois, Donna would become physically abusive toward her children at times. And this, of course, made life at home difficult, and Lois often skipped school and began drinking and smoking at the age of 11 years old. Life in their home was constantly hectic, so she often spent time with friends outside of the home, and despite the problems, she also grew close with her siblings. She attended Mayo High School but stopped going when she was 16. Then she found some work at a local mall, which is where she met Dave Riess, a custodian. In their community, women who didn't go to college, they got married. And I feel like that's reciprocated across lots of small towns across America.
Yeah.
Just something that people have done. So a few years later, on September 17, 1982, Lois married Dave. She was 20 at the time and he was 19. Now, David Leonard Riess, who went by Dave, was born on April 24th, 1963, and he grew up southeast of downtown Rochester. He was known as a prankster at Mayo High School, where Lois had also attended, and Dave graduated in 1981. And in the spring before graduation, he enlisted in the Navy and was later stationed in San Diego. He married Lois only a year after graduating high school, and they would go on to be married for 35 years. Dave, as far as interests go, he loved fishing, he was generous and happy by all accounts, he loved to tell stories, and he made up funny songs, he had an infectious laugh, and people just generally liked to be around him. After Dave finished serving in the Navy in Guam, the couple eventually moved back to Rochester to raise their family. They ended up having 3 children in the 4 years following their wedding: Bill, Bria, and Braden. Braden, their youngest, described his mother saying, quote, "She was caring, always put herself second, and us kids first." It really does sound like Lois, at least at the beginning, and, by all accounts, seems like she was a pretty good mom.
Yeah.
I mean, she was there for her kids, she took care of them, and, there's lots of good memories there. Dave found work driving a forklift at Crenlo, which was a metal equipment manufacturer, and he later opened up a small shop where he sold live bait and fish tackle called the Bait Box. And Lois, she ran a daycare center out of their home, which the daycare center ran from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. every weekday for years. And clients recalled that Lois always had hot breakfast sandwiches ready for you when the parents dropped off their children. She'd also cook the children unique meals every day. That was like one of the things people remember. She's not just cooking frozen chicken nuggets and french fries. Mm-hmm. She was like making homemade meals for the kids there. So
really good meals too, it sounded like.
That's really honestly impressive. And I mean, it does show that she cared about her job and took pride in her daycare facility. In 2005, the family moved to Blooming Prairie, a small town in southeastern Minnesota with a population of less than 2,000, so very small. A small main street runs about 2 blocks, filled with a few locally owned stores, and the town itself is about 1.5 miles square. And the outskirts are filled with large fields of corn and soybeans, and most of the homes, are those modest single-story houses that you see a lot of times, and it's a generally safe town. And especially back in the 80s, I mean, people left their doors unlocked. People were just kind of, trusted each other, weren't worried about.
Growing up in the 90s, we kept our doors unlocked.
Really?
Throughout the day, yeah. We would lock them late at night, but really, yeah, we would just leave them unlocked for the whole day.
I feel like during the day, we probably left our doors unlocked too. Yeah. Well, especially as kids are going in and out of the house all the time. When you lock it behind them all the time.
Got to go down to Nick's house and hang out. Yeah, I don't have a key. Yeah, I'm just running around.
And especially in a town of 2,000.
Right.
I mean, everybody's going to know everybody.
Right, exactly.
So you really feel this sense of safety in that kind of community because, everybody's kind of looking out for each other. And if somebody comes into town that they don't know, everybody then knows about that person. Right. So the Riesses found a spot out in the country about 1 mile south on 218, and here Dave pursued his dream of opening a waxworm farm, which he opened right next to the family home. If you're not familiar with waxworms, they're a popular bait to catch panfish. And a few months after moving, on the afternoon of February 16, 2006, their house caught on fire and burned to the ground. Luckily, no one was injured, but they ended up losing everything, including the family cats, which is absolutely devastating. As for the cause of the fire, it's believed that Dave had done some faulty wiring inside, which obviously made him feel incredibly guilty about. Their friendly neighbors set up a local collection to help raise money for the Riesses, and soon enough, they had enough money to rebuild their house, which ended up having 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Again, Lois set up her daycare facility. But as time passed, and eventually, all of the Riess children had moved out and had children of their own. Lois and Dave ended up having 5 grandchildren. Lois often spoiled them all with gifts, including cell phones and ATVs that they could ride around on the farm property. She also joined a women's bowling league at Bunky's, a small 4-lane alley on Blooming Prairie's Main Street. She even participated in tournaments around the state with a group of about 36 women. And one of these women was Becky Noble, a friend and the executive director of the Blooming Prairie Chamber of Commerce. And Becky once described Lois saying, quote, "She was fun-loving, she had the cutest smile." I mean, it really seems like Lois she's a socialite, she loves being around people, and it seems like everybody that knew her at this time was like, yeah, we like having her around.
Yeah, she seemed like a fun, kind lady.
Totally normal, nothing like major off. I think oftentimes when you hear, about killers and sort of look at their earlier lives, you wonder if people could sense that something was off or like something weird. And people said, yeah, she's maybe a little weird,
a little quirky.
But we're all a little quirky in ways, right?
Sure, yeah.
But for the most part, like, no, she's totally normal. She's a nice lady.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of these quotes are from people after the fact as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Add that, yeah.
Yeah, most of the locals really all kind of shared the same feelings and thoughts about Lois. She was always nice. She had raised a good family. She loved giving thoughtful gifts, especially during Christmas. And of course, she loved cooking for others, always cooking. A few times a week, she'd bring lunch over to a few of the guys working at Dave's worm farm, and they all really loved her lasagna. The Riess friends, Tess and Rob Coster, once invited Lois and Dave to their lake house. Lois was thoughtful enough to bring steaks for dinner and made breakfast for everyone. Scott Carlson, Dave's friend, said that everyone knew Lois was nice, but was also a, quote, click off. She had some odd behavior every once in a while, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Many figured that, it's just her personality. She maybe doesn't have the same likes and interests, or dresses maybe a little bit more eccentric.
It was like it was like a kid's birthday party. She was dressed as like a mermaid, where people were like, that's kind of weird seeing a grown woman like
that weird. I mean,
no, I think maybe you're kind of picking and choosing your memories as standing out as like really odd. But I think as far as I can remember, the party was, if not themed, it was like kind of a goofy, fun party anyways. So
right.
It's not like that insane just to wear a costume to a party.
Yeah, I thought some of the things were a little like, okay, dude.
Yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't want your lady wearing
dressed as a mermaid.
But like, it's not that big of a deal.
No.
She just, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think most people just shrugged it off. They're like, oh, Lois is just having fun.
Yeah. Around 2014, Lois stopped running the daycare, and she ended up helping out at the worm farm on occasion. The business had become a success, just like David hoped, and by then, they were making weekly deliveries to Walmart, to Quick Trip, and local bait shops throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. And they were selling online, so they're shipping orders all over the country. The winter was typically the busiest time for the business because wax worms are in high demand for ice fishermen, and soon enough, Dave's business was raking in the money. Dave was also generous in the community, just like his wife. He was known to treat his employees well, who were mostly guys in their late teens or early 20s, and some even came to think of him as a second father. Outside of their normal paycheck, he often topped off their trucks with gas, gave them extra money when needed, and even took them fishing. A friend of Dave's, Denny Clark, said, quote, "He was kind of people that he didn't even know." Denny had first met Dave about 30 years prior, when Dave was still living at Rochester at the time, and he came over to Denny's house with a mutual friend. They were going to install some carpet as a favor, and all three started talking about fishing, and they soon became friends over this mutual interest. Denny and Dave eventually rented a trailer home on the Mississippi River so they could go fishing whenever they wanted. They even entered some competitions and were good enough to win some money and even make some appearances on TV. Denny said that Dave was just a happy guy. He's just, that classic, outdoorsy type of guy, loves to be on the river, in the water, fishing, having a couple brewskis and, cracking jokes, telling stories. Just a kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Doesn't take life too seriously,
Right.
Lois and Dave were often seen eating dinner at the local servicemen's club. Dave even volunteered on the board to look after the finances, and he eventually discovered someone was embezzling funds, and he put a stop to it. He also came up with the idea for the club to start a lottery ticket system in order to raise money. Outside of his time at the club, he would often shoot pool at the local pizza place or the back room of J&H Liquors. After work, he'd usually go into town, have a few beers, shoot some pool with a few of the other guys, and sometimes they'd end up back at the Worm office where Dave had installed a good stereo system and they could all just hang out. On Sundays, they'd meet up and watch the Vikings game on the big screen TV. Dave would often show up with some of Lois's homemade deviled eggs or even a cake. So just totally normal life.
Like to hang out, small town vibes. You know, they go fishing, they go to the bar, shoot some pool.
ATVs, just enjoying nature, the property.
Yeah, simple life.
Love it. This episode of Lights Out is brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors, Wild Grain. So delicious.
So good.
It's amazing. It's the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, pastries, and pastas, croissants, cookies, you name it. So good.
It's the most delicious carbs ever. And I'm not even exaggerating. No. They're so good. They're so good.
No, you've probably heard me say it before, but I'll say it again. Their chocolate chunk cookies are out of this world, and it's just easy is what I love about it. Everything shows up at your door frozen, and you keep it frozen until you're ready to bake it. Yeah. You don't have to thaw it out.
It's so good.
Heat up the oven.
I had the tonarelli pasta, and I swear to God, it tastes like it was homemade. Like you had just made that pasta and I threw it into the pot. It was so good.
They just launched a new gluten-free box and a plant-based box that is 100% vegan, so everybody gets to partake. And again, it's taking the hassle out of baking, the science behind it, the chemistry, the ingredients. If you're at a mile high, add that to it as well, the elevation.
Oh yeah. I can never figure that math out. And gotta add some baking soda sometimes or change the temp. I can't figure it out. This makes it so much easier.
And you get to customize your boxes. So if you want waffles, you want bread for sandwiches or for toast.
I do.
You want it all. You can do a mix of things.
Yeah.
Just this past weekend, I had a seasonal item, apple cider donuts that they do. They do these seasonal items. Yeah. And all I had to do 5 minutes at $3.50. And it was literally like having a hot donut out of the fryer.
Damn, 5 minutes too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was like, what?
Because for breakfast, you want it to be fast. So
5 minutes to heat some of the stuff up. 20 max for like sourdough or something.
Yum.
And you're gonna just be so hot.
That sourdough bread, the loaves, I got those too. My God.
It is next level. We love it, and we know you will too. And we, of course, have a special offer for you.
So are you guys ready to bring all your favorite carbs right to your doorstep? Be sure to check out Wild Grain so you can begin building your own box of artisanal breads, pastas, and pastries. For a limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off the first box plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/lightsout to start your subscription.
You heard them. Free croissants in every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/lightsout. That's wildgrain.com/lightsout, or you can just use promo code lightsout at checkout because you got to try some Wild Grain. Promise you won't regret it.
The last time that Dave's friends ever saw him was on Thursday evening, March 8th, 2018 at the J&H. Like they always did, they drank, shot pool, talked about football, the usual. Dave and Lois then went to La Crosse, Wisconsin to see their grandson play in a basketball tournament. On Monday, March 12th, the workers at the Worm Farms office knew something was off. 56-year-old Lois had stopped by, but she seemed cold and didn't ask anyone about their weekends like she usually did, and she mentioned that her husband Dave wasn't feeling well and she had to take care of him. They didn't see her for 2 days, but she came back to the office on Thursday, and they found it odd that Dave hadn't contacted any of them. But they knew he had a history of stomach issues, so they tried to be respectful and just give him some space. Maybe he was in the hospital. Employees noticed that none of them were able to reach Dave by phone call, and occasionally they would receive responses to text, but they still knew something was off because Dave usually dictated his messages using voice to text, which I do all the time. And some of the words in his text messages, they came off as like run-on sentences or poor punctuation, really smashed together. But the replies that the employees were receiving used proper grammar and punctuation. So it didn't seem like he was the one sending the text.
Which is very noticeable.
Absolutely.
If
If you know
te-
how people
right.
text, right? Yeah, you can kind of sense when it's not the person. Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden he just started doing proper grammar and punctuation. Like,
Yeah.
I would be like, yeah, this isn't him.
And added on to the fact that they haven't seen him in a few days. Yeah.
Which is odd.
something's-
They're
yeah.
like, how come he hasn't reached out to us?
Right.
Or stopped by to be like, hey guys, I'm, just recouping at home.
Yeah. And just to remind people, the home is very close to the worm farm. It's like I think they say it's like 100 paces or something from the front door of the house to the worm farm. So they're there, and they just want to be respectful. No one's gonna go knock on the door. Where's Dave?
I need to see Dave.
Yeah, no.
Why would you suspect anything is off?
Right, yeah. So Lois mentioned she planned on taking Dave to the doctor on Friday. Then one of the employees asked if everything was okay with Lois when they saw her looking distressed. She just said she hadn't been sleeping well. But by the following week, Lois told them that Dave was cleared by a doctor to compete in the season opener of the Cabela's Master Walleye Circuit. And this was a big fishing competition on the Illinois River. The employees at the worm farm figured that meant Dave would leave about that Tuesday, go and pick up his friend Denny, who he always fished with, and then make the 5-hour drive to the river. But they knew something was seriously wrong when they saw Lois driving Dave's 2005 white Cadillac Escalade at the farm a couple of days later. They knew this was the vehicle that Dave should have taken to the fishing event if he had gone, because he always used the Escalade to haul his 20-foot fishing boat. So just too many weird things adding up. Friends and employees of Dave became extremely concerned, and many remembered the odd comments Dave had previously made on more than one occasion, saying that if he ever went missing, look for Lois.
That is really interesting, especially in later context.
Yeah.
That he mentions this, and his friends even bring this up, like, look for Lois.
That's really weird and disturbing.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. So a day later, Friday, March 23rd, 2018, Lois was seen at Diamond Joe. This farm-themed casino was across the Iowa border in Northwood, about a 45-minute drive from Blooming Prairie. So keep that in mind. Diamond Joe will come up a few more times throughout this story. She went there often, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, sometimes with Dave, and she always preferred the slot machines in the high-stakes room. At around 6:30 p.m., she bought a sandwich at the Come and Go next door, and here she was caught on video surveillance. She asked the clerk if she could head south on 35 and make it to the next state over. He said he thought so. Meanwhile, that evening, the police department in Blooming Prairie dispatched 2 officers to the property for a welfare check for Dave. His concerned employees had called the police and reported Lois's suspicious behavior. So when they arrived, the house was completely dark and no one answered the door. They walked around the house and noticed a light was coming from an open bathroom window. One officer hoisted up another to get a look inside, and the officer saw what appeared to be a body covered with a blanket. They requested 2 deputies from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, and once they arrived, they entered the home. Here's where they found 54-year-old Dave lying dead on the floor. He had been shot twice with a .22 caliber handgun, once in the back and once in the chest. They also noticed one of the bullets had pierced through his forearm, a defensive wound that suggested he had raised it to protect himself. A single .22 caliber shell casing was found underneath him. The other one was not found.
But here's the crazy thing.
Oh, yeah. So this is where it gets really disturbing. They estimated that Dave had been dead for at least 10 days, possibly 12. His body had started to bloat and decompose, and Lois had reportedly been in and out of the house for more than a week after his death, as witnessed by the farm employees, right? They could see who was entering and exiting the house. They were seeing Lois come over to the farm property, go back home. He had been dead inside there, and she was acting casual and just going back and living her life inside the house this whole time.
That's hard to wrap your mind around, because I think it speaks to her mental state. Like, where are you at mentally when you're living in a house with a decaying body?
Right. Yeah. So people, that's why, if you remember, the bathroom window was open, bodies start to smell really bad after a while when they start to decompose.
So it's probably to vent the smell out the window,
right?
Which is interesting. I mean, she's lucky no one else, one of his employees didn't come walking by and smell something.
Yeah. Or anybody.
Anybody,
They
yeah.
didn't have any visitors over at the house for a while. And yeah, his body was just lying there. Super, super
She's just
weird.
going about her business.
Yeah.
Making breakfast, running errands.
Lying to people
Sleeping.
about, sleeping. And then lying to people that, oh, Dave's sick. I'm going to take him to the hospital later. Yeah. Very disturbing. So to many, also in the weeks to come, this seemed beyond something just an angry spouse would do, right? The police thought the act of still going into the house and carrying out normal tasks while Dave's body remained in the bathroom was completely bizarre, to say the least. And immediately, Lois was under suspicion, for good reason. According to her, she was, quote, in and out of real life. And she would wake up incontinent some days and lose track of time in the days that followed. So she tries to play it off. She's like in this weird daze while she's in and out of the house. When investigators questioned their children, they were obviously extremely distraught at the news of their father's death and the fact that their mother was the suspect. One of her sons told an investigator that Lois had not opened any of the recent Snapchats he had sent her, and she wasn't answering any calls. Law enforcement from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation discovered Lois had been at Diamond Joe after tracking her phone's location. But by the time they arrived the next day, she was already gone. Investigator Ben Bowl, who had worked with the Dodge County Sheriff's Office for about a decade, was assigned to the case. The office released a statement identifying Lois as a person of interest. It mentioned that Lois was known to frequent casinos and warned that she might be armed. Investigators had discovered that several years earlier, Lois's father had gifted her a collector's item, and this was a Colt Woodsman .22 caliber handgun. This was assumed to be the murder weapon. Immediately, Lois was the only suspect in Dave's death. Many neighbors and friends also wondered why Lois would kill her husband, whom she had been married to for 35 years. So this case soon became the talk of the town, as you can imagine. And even the Blooming Prairie High School's forensic class would study this case for several weeks. A big problem, though, was that investigators couldn't identify a motive. There was no evidence that Lois or Dave were having an affair of some sort, and there was no evidence of domestic abuse. So when looking more into Lois, investigator Bowl discovered that she had deposited 2 business checks that had been missing from the worm farm. Both totaled about $10,000, and she deposited them into Dave's personal checking account. She then cashed 3 more checks totaling $11,000, and the last was cashed on March 23rd before leaving Blooming Prairie. So investigator Bowl got an arrest warrant for felony theft, but not for murder. The murder warrant, this is where it gets a little confusing. So the murder warrant was not issued because of worries about a speedy trial. So prosecutors worry about the time restrictions causing dismissals due to lack of evidence, but because of these discoveries of fraud, it was enough to arrest Lois without having to start the murder trial, quote unquote, clock, so to speak. But this would cause some issues down the line. So if that makes sense, essentially they're saying, look, we can arrest her for this fraud, this theft charge, but we don't want to slap a murder warrant, arrest warrant on her because this starts the clock for how long we have to compile all the evidence against her for the speedy trial, right? Because that's one of our rights is a right to a speedy trial. So that's why they delayed, but remember this because it will cause issues a bit down the line. But because of this fraud that they were focused on, investigators soon began to theorize that Lois's motive for murder was money related. And even worse, they discovered that she might have committed murder to enable a gambling addiction. Evidence of this addiction quickly unraveled the more investigators looked into Lois's past.
Because investigators discovered that Dave had occasionally gone to a casino called Diamond Joe with Lois, but he wasn't that into gambling, especially compared to his wife. And reportedly had become a problem in the last few years leading up to the murder, and many who knew her began to notice the problem as well. She had once bothered several worm farm employees for money, and she told them it was for a golf cart that Dave could use to go back and forth from the house and the farm. Some ended up giving her money, but they noticed that a golf cart never showed up or was purchased. An anonymous family member also suspected that Lois had gambled away money that was meant for the interment of her father's remains. Lois had collected the money, but the family member noticed that her father's ashes had remained in her house for months after his death in 2014. Her youngest son, Braden, later revealed that Lois had also gambled away an alleged $500,000 inheritance from her father. Just a quick note, this number is most likely off, but Lois's father divided up his assets unequally between his children, and Lois got the least amount. Her sister, Kim Sanchez, reportedly got $200,000 at 25% of the total amount, and according to the will, Lois only got a 15% cut. And Lois felt slighted by this, especially since she took care of her father in his elderly years, but she still received a significant amount of money from him, and she ended up spending and gambling much of it over time. But over the years, she had also stolen from her sister Kim. In October 2010, Kim's marriage was falling apart, and this led to Kim having a mental breakdown. She had also been diagnosed with schizophrenia in her late 30s. She was found incompetent in a court of law, which made divorcing her husband difficult, so Dave and Lois invited her to live with them, and then they placed her in adult foster care. In February of 2012, Lois applied to be Kim's legal guardian and conservator. She claimed that Kim was, quote, unable to perform tasks for daily living, or, quote, make decisions regarding her medical needs. According to court documents submitted by Lois, Kim was bipolar, had clinical depression, and had the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. And in annual reports, Lois claimed that her sister's emotional, mental, and physical states had worsened year over year. Over time, Kim had apparently also developed Parkinson's and had been previously diagnosed with schizophrenia. Kim's OCD was also a concern to Lois. She claimed that Kim's condition caused her to spend excessive amounts of money on impulsive shopping sprees. As Kim's guardian and conservator, Lois had access to her sister's finances. This included a recent $200,000 inheritance from their father. So Lois would withdraw thousands of dollars in cash at the Diamond Joe's ATM, and she said she only withdrew it at the casino because it was more convenient than going to the bank since she was there so often, which I partly believe.
Yeah. So in other words, she's like, hey, I was just there. I wasn't using that money specifically to gamble. I was just withdrawing it at the ATM because it was convenient. So it's up to you to believe that or not. Yeah.
Definitely believe that.
Yeah.
In a 2015 court audit, several more deceitful transactions were uncovered, totaling around $37,000. Lois had an excuse for each transaction, of course. She said that she paid herself for taking care of her sister, but she also gave her children thousands of dollars from Kim's account without permission because she claimed that Kim was a generous person.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, okay. The court deemed that these transactions were illegal. She was then suspended from her guardianship status and officially discharged in early 2016. Her sister Kim was then placed in the state's care. The Steele County Attorney's Office did not press criminal charges, but Lois was required to repay her sister. According to court documents, the reimbursement was set for $58,342. She later did not appear in court, and the court demanded that Lois was also to pay for her sister's new treatment in the state hospital. The new amount of reimbursement was set at $100,534.
Whew.
Yeah, that's a big amount.
Huge chunk of change.
Big amount.
Do you feel like that's deserved?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. I mean, she's just wasting this money, and her poor sister needs care.
Who could have been taken care of by her family, but seeing that her family was just going to exploit her for her money, and now she has to be under state care. Yeah, she should have to pay for that.
But Lois's stealing and gambling addiction had clearly negatively affected her and those around her in the years leading up to the murder. And Dave, by this time, was well aware of his wife's gambling problem. In December 2015, Dave came home from lunch with a coworker. He asked the coworker to drop him off at the house so he could use the bathroom before heading back to the worm farm. When he walked inside, he found Lois unconscious in a chair. She had overdosed on pain medication and even left a suicide note. He immediately called 911, and first responders arrived and performed CPR, and they had a helicopter airlift Lois to St. Mary's Hospital in Rochester, which is part of the Mayo Clinic. She recovered after 2 weeks and spent some time in a psychiatric hospital, and once she got home, she rarely went out. And when she finally did, she acted like nothing had happened. when everybody's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We literally saw we saw all this go down.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine the stigma at play here. You have, gambling addiction mixed with attempting to take your own life. I mean, there's a lot that I could understand why someone wouldn't want to talk about this, but yeah, just acting like nothing had ever happened, which makes me think maybe she didn't have any close friends. She had a lot of friends and people that she knew.
Acquaintances, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe she just legitimately didn't have like super, super close friends. I know there was one friend, which she is interviewed in the documentary. We'll talk about her a little bit later. Her name was Carrie, I believe. And she did have like one, at least the closest friend she did have, she would end up talking to. But I feel like maybe she just didn't have any true support systems for like when shit really hits the fan. Or maybe she just didn't really want to seek out help.
Yeah, the general vibe I get is that she is trying to stay under the radar. And I think in her head, she's concerned about these secrets coming out and where they lead. And I think she knows the police are on, the police are on to her. The police, in the back of her mind, she's trying to be careful.
Sure.
She's trying to sort of go about like everything's normal and there's, nothing going on to raise any eyebrows at. And she thinks she's being smart in that way. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Dave was also pretty quiet after all this happened. And I think just kind of quiet around what's going on at home and how he's feeling internally. He didn't really talk about his emotions. He only made very small comments about the situation to close friends, and he did his best to protect Lois from the gossip around town. And according to Lois, Dave was embarrassed about her suicide attempt. The debts that Lois had acquired had also added stress to their marriage, as you can imagine, because Dave thought he might have to even sell the waxworm farm to cover her debts, which that's like his livelihood, and that was his life goal.
About. Yeah.
And now his wife is screwing everything up for him.
Right.
And again, the farm was their best source of income, and her gambling addiction was literally threatening everything. Dave once told a friend, quote, "That was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, going up to the house that day." This is pretty wild because I think he means regretting saving her from her overdose. Because things are starting to really start to unravel. And he's like, oh, man.
That's such a brutal thing to say.
That is. And that says a lot about the relationship. And I think some people would take that comment to maybe even back up some of the claims that Lois makes.
Right.
Later on.
Yeah. And it goes to show that a lot of their friends, acquaintances, they talked so highly of them. And once you get a peek behind the curtain, you see it's pretty nasty back there.
Yep. The next year in July 2016, Lois disappeared for 3 days. And coincidentally, this was right after a check to reimburse her sister had bounced. She's like, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
David also noticed some debts she had recently acquired, and he reported her missing to the police. He told police that she had suffered from depression. Lois was visiting a friend, Carrie Sherber, in Minneapolis. According to Lois, her relationship with Dave was not what it seemed to many on the outside. She claimed Dave was rarely home, and when they would argue, he was verbally abusive and he would throw things at her. She also claimed he eventually escalated the violence to physical abuse. Her friend Carrie Sherber said that Dave was a hothead and a bully, and she also mentioned that Lois had asked her for thousands of dollars at one point. According to those that knew the couple, many of their arguments were over Lois's spending and, of course, her gambling habits. But Lois said that she felt like divorce wasn't an option. According to those that knew her, Lois spent a lot of time helping others, especially her brother, who had suffered from a motorcycle accident, her sister Kim, and her elderly father, who was very sick before his death. And according to her, she did not spend a lot of time on herself. And by Lois's own admission, gambling was the only thing that made her feel good.
Oof.
Austin, have you ever woken up with a funky symptom like a swollen, itchy eye?
Yes.
A funky looking rash?
Of course.
A tight pain in your neck?
Always.
Or a persistent cold that won't go away? what do? You go to TikTok or you Google it.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah, what's wrong with me in a TikTok? You start looking up things, then you're spiraling because you start hearing people tell crazy stories about the same symptoms that you have, and then your mental health is going down the drain at the same time.
Yeah.
Your physical health's going because you went down the TikTok rabbit hole.
Yep. If there wasn't something wrong with me before, well, there is now, because, misinformation, and I don't know what's going on.
AI generated diagnoses.
Right. Yeah.
That's the new thing. AI doctors on TikTok.
Oh my God.
Well, stop all that nonsense and get on the ZocDoc app so you can talk to a real life professional physician that has patient reviews that you feel good going into. And it's just easy. It's so
really
easy.
It is. Yeah.
ZocDoc takes the pain and the anxiety out of scheduling a doctor's appointment. And you can schedule appointments for all types of doctors, not just, primary care. If you need a dermatologist for that skin rash you got, Austin.
Yup.
ZocDoc's got you covered.
Thank you.
If you need your wisdom teeth out, you find yourself an oral surgeon like I did on ZocDoc.
There you go. I just found my dentist through there, and I had a weird foot problem a while back. I had to go to a podiatrist.
Yeah.
And
forget about those guys.
Yeah, right. They're out there. Yeah, ZocDoc hooked me up.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book your appointment, which just is my favorite part about it. And oftentimes you can get appointments within a couple days. Sometimes you can score same-day appointments. You can search it via your insurance. You can make sure that you find doctors that are actually covered and you don't end up with this huge bill. And you can just see their appointments right there. You're not calling the office, waiting on hold, talking to the receptionist. You can do it all online. Then oftentimes the paperwork is emailed over to you, and bada bing, bada boom, there you are in the waiting room and you're seeing the doctor in no time. It really is the only way to book doctor's appointments these days. If you're not doing it, then start now. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/lightsout to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today.
That's ZocDoc.com/lightsout, ZocDoc.com/lightsout.
The International Journal of Mental Health and Addiction says, quote, many women with gambling problems are seeking a way to numb emotions, shut out the world, and orchestrate a timeout, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Reportedly, women generally fall into gambling addiction by using electronic slot machines. Similar to drugs and alcohol, using these machines can be a way to manage mood. But as gambling addiction progresses, women in these circumstances often become isolated. This increases feelings of loneliness, shame, and guilt that come with gambling problems. Gambling addiction is also often combined with what's called co-occurring conditions. These can include depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. And these conditions can also often appear within families. Because again, Lois's mother struggled with hoarding and mental health issues. She was eventually committed to a state hospital in 1998. Lois also had two sisters, Kim and Cindy, who struggled with mental health problems as well.
So I do want to chime in. That's why, when you look back at this case, it's like, what mental health problems did Lois actually have? Which unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever have real answers to. And that's why, if you remember when she went missing for a little bit, the only report that we actually have like on paper was, which it'll come up again later on, but Dave mentioned to the police that when she went missing, he was like, oh, she suffers from depression. So we only get these really small glimpses into what's actually going on with her mental health, but knowing the broader picture of her family history, we might be able to kind of at least
speculate.
And deduce something.
As far as Cindy goes, she had a history of violence and also intentionally ran over her 37-year-old son with her car. He had shown up to his parents' house drunk and they asked him to leave. He actually lied down on their driveway, refusing to leave, so she ran him over. He suffered a fractured pelvis and injuries to his head, and when asked by police if she meant to do it, she said yes. She was charged with second and third degree assault, criminal vehicular operation, and domestic assault. Cindy later took her own life on August 5th, 2019. So looking through Lois's family history, it's very clear that mental illness was a common denominator, and this illness might have played into her gambling addiction. And I think at the very least, there's just there's probably, there's definitely something just off,
Yeah.
and maybe that's what people were referring to, that they just she kind of seemed off.
Click
I mean, it was her
off, yeah.
personality, but also maybe just mentally, when you talk to her and the things that she would say, you're like, oh, maybe she's struggling with some different mental issues, but
Sure.
and just mental issues in general. And I know some of those, can be generational and hereditary and things like that. So
Yeah, and then, compounded with a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there.
Brian Smith, a U.S. Marshal who assisted in the investigation, discovered that Lois had been withdrawing from friends of the family in the time leading up to the murder. The move from Rochester to Blooming Prairie also isolated her from friends and her daycare work. Brian Smith didn't know if her continued isolation was specifically tied to the condition of her addiction, but she had cut ties with many people around her. Many people that he interviewed said that they knew Lois, but they hadn't talked to her in a while. Brian Smith was the lead coordinator for the U.S. Marshals North Star Fugitive Task Force based in Minneapolis. He knew Scott Rose from the Dodge County Sheriff's Office. Scott had helped him on cases in the past, so Brian offered his assistance for the Dave Riess case. He became even more passionate about the case after meeting with Bill and Bria, who worked especially close with investigators to locate their mother and find out what had happened to their father. They typically avoided the media, but the youngest Braden would later end up doing an interview with Inside Edition. So here's a clip of that interview.
She literally snapped. My whole family is in shock. Nobody ever suspected anything like this. It has devastated our family.
Could you, in your wildest imagination, have ever thought that your mother would do anything to harm your father?
No, never.
How did you react?
Shocked, man. I'm still shocked. It's a bad movie. I feel like I'm gonna wake up and it's gonna be, back to normal. But it's not.
He said
She was a caring, always put herself second and us kids first. Gambling's a terrible thing where it can suck people in and destroy lives.
And how much would she gamble on a night?
We don't know. It was all secrecy. Her mannerisms are all different. I mean, she's a totally different person. I just felt really bad for my mom. I felt like she was alone and desperate.
Have you been able to talk to her?
No, not one word.
If you could talk to her right now, what would you say?
I just told her I loved her.
During Brian's investigation, he uncovered Lois's gambling addiction and the financial betrayals to her friends and family. He also discovered the final straw came when she took her and Dave's savings, meant for a new vehicle, and she lost it all at the casino.
Oof.
Yeah, that's really rough. At that point, Dave cut Lois off completely from their finances, and he told her that if she wanted money, she'd have to come work at the worm farm. Otherwise, he wouldn't be giving her any more money. Friends who were closest to the couple were aware that things were not going well for several years. Although most people in town saw Dave and Lois as a nice, friendly couple because they kept up appearances, and those who did not know about the issues kept it private. To some who were close to the couple, Lois's behavior was hard to ignore. Everybody's worried, right?
Yeah. I mean, so it's weird because, like, if you know someone, they're having money issues, they're arguing, they have a gambling addiction problem within the family. I mean, those are things that any family can deal with, right? But then what happens after this? Like, the escalation to murder is jarring, right?
Yeah, it's how did we go from 0 to 100 here?
Right.
There's a way to come back from this.
Exactly.
There's a way to get help.
Right.
But that just doesn't happen.
No.
And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Why this immediate escalation? Was there other things going on? Was there, other motives perhaps? And that's something investigators are trying to figure out. They're like, clearly we have a motive here. It's the money thing.
Yeah.
But is that enough to escalate to murder?
Right. I think this is the first one we've covered, at least since I've been doing it, that is involving gambling addiction and like severe money problems like this. I don't remember any cases that we've covered.
No.
Yeah,
I think so.
It's kind of a one of a kind here. So on April 2nd, this is over a week after the murder, Lois visited Tess Coster. If you remember, Tess and her husband, Rod, they were Florida snowbirds from Blooming Prairie. They had been friends with the Riesses. Lois and Dave since around 2005 and even invited them to Florida a few years earlier. And at the time, Tess and Rod owned 5 rental units on Fort Myers Beach. Tess said they had gotten along great with the Riesses and that they were great people. But Tess was mortified when Lois arrived to one of their rental units that her and Rod had been cleaning that day at 880 3rd Street, Fort Myers Beach. At around 1:45 p.m., Tess saw Lois at the end of the driveway checking a notebook and looking for the house address. Tess was aware that Dave had been recently murdered and the police had been looking for Lois. So Tess was obviously in shock and she stepped forward and asked, quote, "Can I help you?" And after making eye contact, Lois responded, quote, "Wrong house," walked quickly back to her Escalade and then drove off.
Can you imagine though how fucking wild that would be? Like,
I'd be
clearly
terrified.
she went there because they were there.
Yeah.
She knew that.
Yep.
And
They-
you're
Yeah.
like, whoa. am I
That would be
seeing this?
so scary, seeing a wanted murderer just show up at the end of your drive. And like clearly with her notebook and stuff looking for the address, she was specifically looking for those properties.
Just like, oh, I'll just go hole up in one of those.
Yeah.
Find an empty one.
Right. Yeah, that is the question too. What was she doing
Mhm.
there? Which, we'll get into a little later, but clearly she made a big trek all the way there, all the way to Florida.
Yeah. I mean, when other people found out about this, they were like, wow, she actually went all that way
Yeah, very far.
from the top of the states all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a short drive there.
No, we're
It's a
going
trek.
really far. So then it raises the question, what is she doing here?
It's weird that she took Dave's Escalade too.
Yep. I know. Wouldn't
That
be
seems
the
like
most
a dumb
obvious thing,
move on her
right?
part.
Yeah.
You're going to take Dave's Escalade
Yeah.
when you know they're looking for you.
Right. And remember, in the back of your head, there is no murder warrant arrest issued.
Because you're like, how is she even able to leave?
How was
Leave
she able to
town.
leave? Right.
So that's one of the issues with not putting the murder warrant out there is word doesn't get out.
No, all these other jurisdictions have no idea. There is a warrant for her arrest on the theft,
But
on
they're
the
not
fraud.
they're not necessarily going to extradite somebody for that
No.
or even pick them up for that.
Yeah, looking out for their vehicle like that. No. So yeah, it's kind of weird how this is unfolding. But Tess Coster then immediately called 911. There was a little bit of a weird thing because they were freaking out. So they actually called their daughter to call 911. And it was
Because they
kind
were
of all
hiding.
yeah, they thought
They were that scared that maybe she was there to kill
she had
them.
a
for
weapon
some
or
reason.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there was kind of a kerfuffle, and she did end up contacting the police there. But then it was weird. The operator then told them they needed to contact the jurisdiction where the murder occurred.
Which I thought that was so bizarre.
Insane,
Why would a
yeah.
dispatcher even tell you that?
No, it's super weird. We do have a short clip of that 911 call that we'll listen to.
Lake County Sheriff's Office, this is Penny speaking. How can I help you? Hi, there's an ATV out for a Lois Riess from Blooming Prairie, Minnesota in Steele County. She just got out of her car at my Florida house.
At the time, Riess was already a suspect in the murder of her husband, Dave, back in Minnesota.
Okay, so she has a warrant, is that what you're saying? Yes, for the possible murder of her husband and for surfer embezzling charges.
Which I think that was Tess.
Yeah, that was
That was Tess, but there's
because
another-
there was some back and forth with the daughter, and the daughter was
Yeah.
confused. So then she had to call, and then they were like, "No, you have to call this other thing." Which, if someone can kind of fill me in the comments section how operators work, because to me, wouldn't it be like, "Hey, there's this potential murderer here, but she's from this other jurisdiction." Wouldn't the operator then be like, "Okay, let me get on the line with them," rather than telling the caller?
Yeah.
There's a murderer here, like outside my house. It's
Well, I think
weird
they would
that's
just dispatch officers out there to let them deal with it. Let
regardless.
them call. Yeah.
Right. So I'm very confused at this whole thing, how this whole thing shook out. And you can hear how she's a bit confused because she's telling them like, okay, she says for sure the embezzling charges, but she also said for the possible murder of her husband, because what I'm assuming is that when she had called previously, there's like, hey, there's no warrant for this murder. We don't know what you're talking about. because there's only the charge, the warrant for the embezzling and the fraud, right? So it's just got really confusing. They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, and I think the Dodge County Sheriff's Office definitely fucked up here because they should have had surveillance on her.
Yeah.
As soon as they started
Immediately.
suspecting her of murdering her husband, which
Right.
it was very obvious she's the leading suspect.
Absolutely.
And they should have had eyes on her. So the fact that she was able to hop in her husband's Escalade and drive all the way down to Florida
Yeah.
with, as far as we know, without them knowing is crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah. Do you think it's the granny energy? Do you think it's like, oh, she's just, maybe she just snapped and this is a one-off? And
I think there's definitely some profiling going on here.
Yeah.
And I think also lack of experience too.
Yeah.
I don't
Small
think
town.
I don't think they're solving a lot of murders out there.
Yeah.
So I think they certainly weren't considering her like this armed and dangerous suspect.
Right.
They're like, oh, we know Lois. What's she going to do?
Right.
Run to the grocery store.
Right. Yeah.
Bake some cookies or something. Like they were not looking, they did not foresee what was about to happen and what the fact that things only escalate from here.
Yeah.
So they just kind of like
shrugged it off a little bit.
They weren't taking it as seriously as they should have been.
Right.
Is what I think. But
right. Which is what led to all this confusion. And it gets even weirder because a half hour passed before 2 deputies from the local Lee County Sheriff's Office arrived, which is really disturbing that there is a potential murderer outside my house that just showed up, and they took a half hour to roll in. And
it was likely armed.
It was likely armed. And really, this isn't like a vast metropolis of an area. This is like a touristy town that's pretty small.
Fort Myers.
Yeah.
It's not a big area.
Right. So they had apparently taken their time because they figured Lois had gotten spooked and would be long gone by the time they arrived. Weird excuse. And there were technically only warrants out for theft, as we mentioned, but not murder because the warrant had not been submitted yet. After this, Lois would finally be indicted for murder after seeing what the confusion over the arrest warrants had caused. So they eventually finally did get those arrest warrants for murder because, the system was failing here and it was just causing confusion. But then even when they arrived at the time, police only patrolled their little neighborhood for a bit. They also didn't bother to watch the bridge to the mainland because if you know Fort Myers, if you look at it on a map, there's really just one bridge that comes over there.
Connects to the island, yeah.
Yep. And they didn't even bother to check the rest of Fort Myers, which turns out is exactly where Lois had been.
Just not taking it seriously.
No.
They're like, okay, she's got embezzling charges. They're not understanding. They're not communicating with Dodge County. Dodge County's not communicating with them.
Right.
They're not watching their suspect to make sure or saying, hey guys, Lee County, we think she might have done this.
Yeah.
Can you guys keep an eye on her for us? Keep us updated with her location. Can you go talk to her, pick her up,
right,
and let us come down there and interview her? No, none of that. It's just
none. And if you watch that docuseries, it does seem like Lee County Sheriff's Office is trying to overcompensate for this failure. Where
that's saying it light. Putting it lightly.
I mean, I can't remember his name, but he comes across as like, we don't mess around here. If you're in my county, I'm going to throw you in the hole. Like,
we should play it. Danny, look up and see if we can play their recruitment video real quick. I bet you it's on YouTube, just like a snippet of it, because
their recruitment video is insane. Good Lord.
Do you have what it takes
911, what is your emergency?
to answer the call day or night? To serve others before yourself. To fiercely protect the community. To be a role model for the younger generation. Keep residents safe here on land, on our waterways.
The chopper one, we got eyes on the suspect.
And from the air.
Not on this suspect.
There's something bigger than yourself. Professionalism is more than just an image. It's It's an attitude.
That's shot, man.
If you have what it takes to be a law enforcement officer, then come join my family at the Lee County Sheriff's Office. And let's keep paradise.
Man,
they-
I'm quitting podcasting. I'm gonna go work for the Lee County Sheriff's Office because I want to be a superhero too.
Oh man,
He's giving me like Vin Diesel vibes. or something.
yeah.
But we'll be talking about Mr. Sheriff Mercino.
Yeah. He'll come up a bit later, but wow, man. If we have any listeners in Florida, you guys, they don't breed them like they do in Florida. It's just a completely different type of person.
They take it
down
very
there.
seriously down there.
Yeah.
Day or night,
Yeah.
they're there. But if a murder suspect gets called in by a citizen, they're like,
Yeah,
I
right.
don't believe you.
We'll get around to it.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. So while Lois was hiding in plain sight, the next day, April 3rd, 2018, 59-year-old North Carolina native Pamela Hutchinson, who went by Pam, arrived in Florida at Fort Myers Beach. This is the resort hub of Estero Island in the Gulf of Mexico where many people go on vacation. Pam previously worked as a car salesman in Virginia Beach. She then divorced her husband, who was reportedly controlling, and moved to Bradenton, Florida 2 years earlier. Pam was described as a free spirit who was friendly, social, fun, and outspoken. She loved fishing, staying out late, and vacationing in Mexico. So she was visiting her good friend Donna Fetro, who had just lost a husband, and the plan was to go and spread her husband's ashes on the neighboring Sanibel Island. Donna and her family stayed on Sanibel Island while Pam stayed by herself at a timeshare just across the water in condo 404 at the Marina Village in Estero Island. This was only 2 blocks from Tess Coster's rental property. On the evening she arrived in Fort Myers Beach, she headed over to Sanibel Island to have dinner with her friend Donna. They watched the sunset together before Pam headed back to her condo. And on the next evening, Donna visited Fort Myers Beach. They ate lunch together, and Donna offered for Pam to join her for dinner on Sanibel, but Pam declined. She had recently made friends with another middle-aged woman she had just met. And this was Lois Riess. Although Lois was possibly going by a different name at this time, we don't actually know. But that evening, Lois garnered some sympathy from Pam by telling her how she was recently widowed, and the 2 women then shared a few drinks over the course of 3 hours. A security camera caught Lois and Pam as they headed back to Pam's condo. Initially, that was supposed to be Pam's last night in Fort Myers Beach, but she was having such a good time that she decided to stay another day. On the evening of April 5th, Pam and Lois had dinner together at the Smoking Oyster Brewery, where they were again caught on surveillance footage. They sat at the bar and ordered everything they wanted, like money was no issue, and at 7:37 p.m., Pam paid the bill for a Long Island iced tea, a watermelon margarita, a sweet tea, a Bloody Mary, and a Bahama Mama, along with half a pound of peel and eat shrimp, a side of chard, and a small chowder. That night, Pam's friend Donna Fetro texted her. She told her they were planning on spreading her husband's ashes that night, but Pam never responded. That week, Pam had also found a condo she was interested in buying, and Pam's realtor, Judy Keene, sent her paperwork for the condo she was in the process of buying. They texted back and forth for a bit, but after 7 p.m. that night, Judy did not hear from Pam. And then after the weekend had passed, she still hadn't heard from her, and she figured maybe Pam had just changed her mind, had some buyer's remorse. And then also on top of that, close friends of Pam also noticed she wasn't responding to texts. So on Friday, April 6th at 8:30 in the morning, the Marina Village manager at the front desk, Lori Russell, got a call from condo 404. It was Lois Riess, although Lori thought it was Pam Hutchinson calling. She said she wanted to stay in 404 through the weekend, and Lori agreed and used Pam's credit card on file to add several more nights to her stay. Lois was later seen at the Wells Fargo Bank in Fort Myers Beach. She then used Pam's identification to withdraw $5,000 from Pam's bank account. It's important to note for listeners that both Pam and Lois looked somewhat similar. Both were similar in age, They had a light hair color, complexion was similar, and their build was similar. So it's theorized that Lois had carefully planned the crime to assume Pam's identity to avoid detection and steal more money. Later that day, Lois drove Pam's Acura TL north about 240 miles to Ocala, Florida, and checked into a Hilton. So the question is, where is Pam? She signed in Pam's name for 2 room service deliveries and paid with one of Pam's credit cards. She left the following morning, and around 10:30 a.m., she withdrew $500 3 times from Pam's account at an ATM in Ocala. She then headed north again and later crossed state lines into Louisiana. She then made her way to Coushatta Casino Resort in Kinder. She later won $1,500 on a $5 bet, and when she went to collect her winnings, she used her own driver's license and social security card to identify herself at 1:35 p.m. She's going out of her way to disguise herself as Pam, and as you can assume, well, what has happened to Pam? We'll find out pretty soon here, but it's odd that then she goes to collect winnings and she's like, yeah, it's me. It's Lois Riess. I'm out here, leaving a huge paper trail for herself.
And why do you need to stay in the Hilton?
Yeah.
You're on the run. You're a fugitive at this point. You need to stay at the Hilton?
Yeah.
It seems like she just was burning through money.
Sure.
And that gambling addiction is there. So she's needing to continue to feed that because that's probably giving her some type of escape and maybe helping her stay calm through all of this.
Yeah.
And so she's just burning through seemingly like decent amount of cash. I mean, to just drive across the country and stay at cheap motels, you could do it for a lot cheaper, but she's like blowing loads of money this entire time.
Yeah.
So I think she was probably just running out of money. And here she traded $5 for $1,500. And she's like, well, shit,
I got to cash this out.
I need this if I want to continue this run. And so she just said the risk was worth it to her to use her driver's license. And I think she probably still felt like, oh, I'm 10 steps ahead of the authorities still. So by the time that they figure out I was here and got this money, that I'll be long gone by that point.
Which, is she wrong?
Not really.
Unfortunately, no, she's kind of right.
Yeah, there's still, I mean, she probably thought, oh, fuck, when she saw Tess in Fort Myers and was like, oh, shit, I got to get out of here but then she still sticks around for a while, which was interesting. Knowing that somebody who knew her from back home saw her, that was really bizarre to me that she still stuck around and didn't hightail it out of town at that point.
Yeah, unless is she that far ahead of the police where even they were suspecting like, oh, she's probably long gone by now, but instead she's 2 blocks away. Like, do you think she actively thought that through and was like, there's no way they would think I would stay here after showing my face? Like, do you think she's that good at evading police like that?
No.
Okay, yeah.
No, I really don't.
That's a huge play if you're going to do that.
I think she's kind of having half-baked thoughts about all of this and is
just kind of flying by the seat of her pants.
One moment it's this and then she decides to do that and I think the money is really controlling her movements too.
Yeah.
And also it seems like she's also strategizing her long-term game plan all at the same time. Because she's like, okay, I made it to Florida. Now what? Now I'm going to go towards Louisiana and start heading that way, seemingly heading to Mexico. If you look at it geographically,
a casino. I wonder if the casino's on her mind. Like, where's the closest big casino I can go to?
And so I think she's kind of just thinking all of this all at the same time, which is making her very sloppy.
Yeah.
At the same time, but again, you think with all of these slip ups, authorities would be right there.
Yeah, you would think
they would have caught her. I mean, the fact that she even gets out of Florida is insane to me.
Yeah.
So much for the Lee County Sheriff's Office being on top of stuff. And again, they would probably be like, well, we didn't know. We didn't know that it's Dodge County's fault because they didn't tell us. They didn't process the murder warrant. So we can't do anything. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Because I think they denied making any mistakes in this law, but it's
okay.
Obvious you could have gone the extra mile and, prevented something horrible from happening and just didn't do it.
Yeah, with that recruitment video, it's like, yeah, can you handle it? Can you be? I mean, it sounds like I could handle it. Seems like just lay back. Well, we'll show up 30 minutes later. We don't have to go patrol the bridge. Nah, we'll deal with that later.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I wonder if they have some regrets.
Yeah.
Looking back on this case.
I would hope so.
But on April 9th, meanwhile, back in Fort Myers Beach, the Marina Village manager, Lori Russell, was going door to door checking units for a possible water leak in the building when she noticed a foul smell coming from condo 404. Figuring at first, it's probably just some sewage or, drain clog or something like that. She then got 2 maintenance workers, and some reports claim that they were guests, to enter the condo. They soon discovered Pam Hutchinson dead on the bathroom floor. A pillow that had been shot through was resting on top of her legs. And of course, they immediately called 911. When police arrived, they saw Pam had been shot in the back. The wound that killed her penetrated her left lung, heart, esophagus, and her upper right lung. Again, a .22 caliber bullet was also discovered in the right cup of her bra. No casing was found. And she had been deceased for several days. Her toothbrush was found in the sink, and investigators believe that she had been standing at the sink, brushing her teeth when she was attacked from behind, causing her to drop her toothbrush. Her mouth had also been stuffed with a towel, and the crack under the bathroom door was also stuffed with a towel. The thermostat had also been turned down to 61 degrees.
So trying to contain the smell, right?
Right. And also, whoever did this is hoping that it slows down decomposition,
Right.
Because if AC off in Florida, it's going to get hot
Yeah.
and muggy in there, and it's going to speed things up. So
Yeah.
I think that's the thought process behind that. But
Definitely.
Pam's identification, credit cards, and vehicle were all missing. They also noticed that the guest bedroom and the guest bathroom had been recently used, meaning someone else had most likely been spending time in the condo with Pam. Lee County Sheriff's deputies then notified Pam's ex-husband in Virginia Beach. Then they interviewed other condo occupants at the Marina Village and Pam's friends, including Donna. Pam's credit card transactions led them to Smoke and Oyster Brewery, Wells Fargo, and Ocala Hilton Hotel, where they found surveillance footage of a woman who looked a lot like Pam Hutchinson. But obviously, this wasn't Pam Hutchinson in the footage, because they obviously know they just found her deceased, so somebody is impersonating her. Deputies had visually confirmed Pam's identity, which matched the body in the condo bathroom. They also found condo surveillance footage that placed Pam and another woman, who investigators hadn't identified at the time, at condo 404 at the time of the murder. In footage obtained from April 5th at 7:46 p.m., Pam and the other woman could be seen approaching Pam's condo. Later at 8:34 p.m., a camera captured the other woman walking by herself toward the building's 4th floor elevator. She then stood in the landing area for 13 minutes, appearing distraught and possibly crying. Then she returned to Pam's condo. It's believed this was right after the murder took place.
That's really crazy that she is appearing distraught and crying after this murder, which is just in cold blood. Clearly, premeditated, was doing it specifically to assume her identity, take her money, but then she's like showing some guilt and regret afterwards.
Yeah,
really disturbing.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And also not being careful.
Right.
If you just committed a murder, why would you then go stand in an area where there's a security camera filming you for 13 minutes?
Yeah, good point.
And I think, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, I think this is all happening so quickly that she's not really thinking through everything clearly. And I think this is affecting her in some way and affecting her judgment. And she's just like, what do I do next? You know, now I've done this. But yeah, it's interesting she stood there for that long. So they have this clear shot on surveillance of her. The footage from the next morning showed the woman in the Marina Village parking lot, and she could be seen moving Pam's Acura next to a Cadillac Escalade and moving luggage and items from the Escalade into the Acura. And then this person drove the Acura out of the parking lot. The Escalade was later found abandoned on April 8th at the northern tip of Fort Myers Beach. 2 knives and a potential spot of blood were found inside. The registration of that vehicle belonged to Dave Riess, and Lois was on the insurance card. Police had clearly failed to search the area properly when they were warned by Tess and Rod Coster after seeing Lois at their rental property over a week earlier. Tess's daughter Brianna said, quote, "The police down there did a horrible job. That woman could still be alive today." And I 1000% agree with that.
Yeah, I agree too.
They could have prevented Pam from being murdered had they gone and picked her up.
Lois was 2 blocks away. It's mind-blowing to think about that.
Especially when you hear the sheriff himself in the docuseries, he gets interviewed at the beginning of part 2 of it. And he tries to act so like he's taking this so personal and like any crime in my city, in my county is personal against me. And it's like
everything feels like a commercial with him.
Oh,
like
totally.
It's all like PR and weird. Yeah, like he has to put on a front for everything.
And maybe if he had been the responding officer, maybe him personally would have done something different.
True.
And maybe his officers really did fuck up in this.
Right. Yeah.
But that's your opportunity for shit. We really dropped the ball there. We should have picked her up.
Yeah.
Tess had been so disturbed by her encounter with Lois that she broke out in a rash and threw up the following 2 mornings. She thought that maybe Lois was hoping to find one of the rental properties empty so she could hide there. Or worse, she was there to possibly kill Tess. She said, quote, "She's turned me from that small town trusting person to having a loaded gun by my bed." Local police connected the murder of Pam, the murder of Dave, and the incident involving Lois at Tess's property along with the abandoned Escalade. So Tess was then brought to the Lee County Station where she identified Lois Riess in all 3 videos of surveillance footage. She also identified Lois in 2 photos from the bank where she had withdrawn Pam's money. For police, this finally confirmed that Lois had now most likely murdered 2 people, and Lois was on the verge of being a serial killer and she was still on the run. So who knows what she's going to do next?
Yeah, right?
She's willing to kill Pam in cold blood just to steal her identity, to then steal her assets from her.
Yeah.
What
else could she do?
She's capable of anything at that point.
Just a loose cannon. Police then put out a, quote, "be on the lookout" alert for Lois Riess nationwide. Back in Minnesota, investigator Ben Bowl saw the alert and contacted Lee County deputies. So this case is also fascinating because it's just showing like crossing jurisdiction lines and the information that has to be sent over and confirmed and then not having warrants out. And like, it's such a mess between when it's not a federal case, you know, and
well,
it's
it
like
should be a federal case.
Right. At this point, she's crossing state lines and murdering multiple people.
Well, not only that, I mean, she's committing like bank fraud.
Right. True.
And as soon as you start committing crimes in a bank, that's immediate FBI jurisdiction. So the fact that they're not getting the FBI involved in this, I mean, they do get the U.S. Marshals involved.
Yeah, pretty soon.
And
here,
so, which was good because, you know, they can go wherever. But
yeah,
I'm surprised the FBI wasn't called in
earlier.
As soon as she started crossing state lines and doing withdrawals from ATMs. I mean, she's now committing federal fraud.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But it's Lee County.
Yeah. Yeah.
We take this shit seriously.
Yeah. Sure you do. So those jurisdictions, they traded information on the respective cases and pointed out that both murders were very similar. Both victims had been murdered in the same way, and the victims' money and vehicles had been taken afterward. Police then notified the public on TV saying that Lois's appearance made her seem like anybody's, quote, grandma, meaning that she was very disarming, but they warned she was a cold-blooded killer. They also warned that her resources would eventually run out and she might become desperate, meaning she might kill again. Meanwhile, U.S. Marshals escalated the case to a major case, which is the highest priority, and added more resources to the manhunt. They set up a hotline and posted billboards stretching from Texas to California. A $5,000 reward was offered, and Florida Crime Stoppers added another $1,000 on top of that. The tips came flooding in, but nothing of substance, unfortunately, and law enforcement worried that Lois's trail was quickly going cold.
Imagine being these law enforcement agencies and having a grandma
yeah, right.
outsmart you and you know,
oh boy,
on the run. You can't catch grandma.
Oh man, that would
major blows to the ego.
Yeah, seriously, I think my morale would be shot if
I'd be embarrassed if I was the sheriff of Lee County and this happened.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
How the hell? So,
yeah,
and it's
fumbles like over and over again. We're fumbling this ball.
And poor Pam, who's just there.
Did nothing wrong.
Tried to find a new place to live, just befriending people. Seemed like a really
on vacation,
really nice human being, and then gets taken advantage by this monster that just rolled through and then got away.
Yep.
Insane.
So Lois was last spotted on camera in Pam's Acura along Texas Highway 77. This was south of Houston on April 8th at 11:16 p.m. Police figured she was trying to get to Mexico, so they alerted Border Patrol and Mexican law enforcement. Lois didn't have an active passport, but they figured she might try to cross the border by assuming someone else's identity or possibly by boat. Meanwhile, Lois was going by the name Donna around South Padre Island in Texas. And this is a narrow island in the Gulf of Mexico, close to the border. So they were probably right in thinking that she was trying to head to Mexico eventually. South Padre Island, it's been described as a, quote, low security prison for misfits. And she hung around making friends in the area for more than a week. They just didn't know she was hanging out here. She checked in at a local Motel 6 on April 9th. And
Okay, finally.
Yeah, it cheapened it up a bit.
Living within her means at this point.
Yeah. And she made plenty of friends who were also potential victims during her stay. She went out to all the local spots, drank at the bar, listened to live music, just acting like this is just a fun vacation. And she always paid in cash and tipped very generously. She often garnered sympathy by telling new friends that her husband had just recently died.
You think she kind of knows this is all going to end?
I think she's just going, this is her last hurrah.
Let me see how far I can get.
Yeah, I think
have a couple more good nights, some few more margaritas, and
I
listen to Margaritaville a few more times.
800 more times, yeah.
Before it's prison slop.
Yeah, I think that's probably exactly what she's doing.
Because I'm like, I don't know that I really believe she thought she was going to be able to get into Mexico.
Get this far.
Yeah,
I'm not
or
even
get this
sure
far.
She
Yeah,
even thought she'd get to South Padre Island. She probably just figured, hey, I guess I'll set up shop here.
And even if she got into Mexico, she's going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Right?
Dude.
Yeah, that's
they're
true.
They're gonna and I think there's this misconception that, oh, if I just get to Mexico, I'm scot-free. And,
you're good. Yeah.
No, dude, they'll go
yeah.
hunt your ass down and get you out of Mexico. And the Mexican authorities most likely will help.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't want you there.
Right.
So it's not like you can just and yes, do some criminals potentially go to Mexico and disappear? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult. It's harder than it sounds.
Yeah. And knowing that she's kind of just bumbling around, going day to day, kind of thinking up last minute plans, it doesn't seem like she has she hasn't really thought out too far ahead on even if she got to Mexico, what the hell would she do there? She doesn't seem like a very plan oriented person that thinks beyond like a day or two out. It's really
no, she's just kind of living out this extended vacation.
Yeah.
Like this last road trip.
Right. And how much money can
spending
I blow?
a week in, South Padre Island when you could have just beelined it for the border.
True.
And had a whole week to try to figure out how to get across.
True. No, she's checking into the Motel 6. She's like talking to the front desk people, hanging out. Like it's very bizarre, but I guess she thinks, she's like, if I've gotten away with it this far, why not just keep riding this? Because I could imagine she didn't think she was going to get this far at all.
Either that or she's just completely delusional.
That could be it
she's
too.
gotten away. She's gotten away with all this stuff because she's surprised she hasn't been caught yet, and is having thoughts of like, man, grandma rolling around.
Yeah.
And they haven't caught me yet. I haven't been stopped. I haven't been stopped by law enforcement.
True. And
all the way up there.
Maybe she thinks because she cracked the window with her husband, put the blanket over him. No one caught him for, it was
the fact she hasn't been arrested for that. And that's happened a while ago.
And then on the second murder, she stuffed the towel under the door, set the thermostat to low. So maybe she thinks no, she must be watching the news. Like she has to know that these bodies are being found, but maybe she's seeing like how many days she can buy with how she's like, for lack of a better word, storing the bodies. So I don't know. Maybe she's just buying time and eventually, I don't know, her plan's just to get caught. Not sure.
I don't know. It seems to me like she's just kind of flying by the seat of her pants.
Yeah.
Like she has no idea what she's going to do next, and she's just trying to ride it out as long as she can. I think she knows that it's going to end eventually, and that's why she's getting bolder and bolder, because she knows.
Yeah.
There's no good options.
No.
To get away with this.
No.
Eventually, it's going to catch up with you.
Exactly.
And it's not exactly like you did a great job of covering up your crimes by any means.
Yeah.
You know, like even with her husband, the fact she just left him where he was. She
On the
doesn't try,
floor.
you know, in other cases, they try to conceal the bodies, they try to dispose of them, they get them, you know, take more effort in covering up what they did.
Yeah.
But she just leaves him where she killed him, leaves Pam where she killed her, does a couple little things to buy maybe a couple days. I mean, she had to have known they're going to come in.
For
You know,
sure.
her stay is over. They got to clean the condo for the next people. They're gonna. So I think Dana's exactly right. She knows.
She knows. Yeah.
But she's like, I'll just live it up.
Yeah, that's why I think I don't even know if she had planned on making it to South Padre. But then once she got there, she was like, I guess I'll just hang out.
Yeah.
Because they haven't caught me yet.
We'll just keep it going.
Yeah.
Where else can we go?
I think she's just, at this point, she's just gambling with that.
Yeah.
She's just gambling with the cops. It's just,
It's different kind of
maybe
gambling.
it's kind of exciting and fun for her.
Yeah,
and
for
she's
sure. I
getting
think
a
there's some
high off of
adrenaline.
it.
Yeah, definitely. Some
Like, ooh, I'm
adrenaline.
kind of playing this game.
Mhm.
You know?
It kind of comes off as like like a crime movie, like a road trip crime movie, you know?
Totally.
It's like you're Bonnie and Clyde or whatever. You just go on a one final rampage like a meteor, knowing that the show is going to end. But
Also knowing you're leaving a huge trail behind you.
huge trail.
Lots
yeah.
of clues for investigators to follow.
Yeah.
I don't
So-
think she and she probably was never thinking, oh, I'm gonna be on the U.S. Marshals highest priority
Yeah, that's
case list.
crazy.
And those guys don't fuck around.
No,
you know, those
no.
guys are finding the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
So the fact she
That
made it
they're
on there,
yeah,
is
that's wild.
next level,
Yeah.
man.
That's wild. But yeah, the scariest part is this woman was just hanging out. She met a 76-year-old man named Ron Mulholland on April 17th. Ron owned a few condos on South Padre, and around 9 p.m., they ended up sitting next to each other at the bar of Padre Rita. And after striking up a conversation, Ron invited Lois to go to a karaoke bar nearby. She joined him. Later, he dropped her off at the Motel 6 later that night. He gave her his business card and said he wanted to go out again. So we're going to go through, I mean, that's one is Ron. We're going to go through a few more coming up here of, you know, potential victims. Because at this rate, you know, who's to say that she was going to stop this spree? And it's just weird. These really close encounters kind of put into perspective how it could, I don't want to freak people out, but how
Could have
it
gotten
could
even worse.
yeah, and how it could be you. You're coming across a person at the pool in the Motel 6. Yeah, this woman is wanted by the U.S. Marshals and has murdered 2 people. It's kind of surreal to think like that. But she's on the national news by now, and this is a clip from April 18th.
Now to an urgent manhunt that is underway for a grandmother who is on the run, accused of killing her husband in Minnesota and then killing a woman who looked like her in Florida, all in order to steal her identity. ABC's Victor Okendo has the latest on her possible whereabouts.
This morning, the nationwide manhunt for the grandmother in the blue shirt seen here smiling on surveillance, accused of murdering her husband and the woman she's speaking with at the bar.
The only thing we know is that she is absolutely armed, dangerous, she's on the run, and we need to do everything we can to bring her to justice.
Lois Riess allegedly killed her husband last month in Minnesota, then took off in their Cadillac Escalade. Her first stop, a casino in Iowa.
Our suspect loves casinos, and she has a gambling problem.
From there, Riess made her way down to Fort Myers, Florida, where police say she made a calculated decision, lining up her next victim by befriending a woman who resembled her. Riess and 59-year-old Pamela Hutchinson spotted here chatting at a bar. Hutchinson was later killed at her motel. Police believe these images appear to show Riess leaving that motel, stealing Hutchinson's purse, ID, and credit cards, along with her car, a white Acura they say was last seen in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Our main fear is that once she diminishes all her resources, that she will be desperate and she will commit another act of violence.
Authorities say that she might even be in Mexico at this point. U.S. Marshals are helping in the search. Riess is wanted for murder, grand theft auto, and identity theft.
So on another evening, she met a lonely 65-year-old court reporter named Bernadette Mathis, alone at an oyster bar. They struck up a conversation and eventually exchanged numbers. Bernadette said that they hit it off like they were best friends. They went out again the next evening, but after Bernadette's second drink, she began acting extremely intoxicated, so the bartender cut her off. Next thing she knew, her and Donna were back at her house sitting in her hot tub, and Bernadette didn't think anything of it. They made conversation throughout the night, and Lois mentioned that her husband had recently died of a heart attack. Lois later spent the night in the guest bedroom. Bernadette admitted that Lois, who she only knew as Donna, had acted like a really nice person. She was friendly, and she quickly trusted her. But Bernadette had security cameras throughout her house, which Lois probably noticed, and the next morning the two women went out for breakfast. They made plans for dinner together for the next Friday, April 20th, but they never saw each other again. I also want to note, like, Lois must know at this point that the national news...
Yeah, she's had to have seen coverage
and
that
now
they're looking for her.
Just openly showing her face around town, it seems like it's like...
Whatever
I'm
happens,
gonna get
happens.
caught.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's also bold knowing that other people are probably watching the national news and, you know, are bound to come across that story and maybe be like, that woman looks a little familiar, right? So, pretty bold. Also seems like she knows that she's at the end of her rope here. But back at the Motel 6 pool, Lois made even more friends. 52-year-old Isabel Barriero had come to the island by herself for a vacation. They had a few drinks, talked for a few hours. So Isabel teared up as Lois talked about how her husband had recently died. This seems like the tool she's consistently using to get people
to trust her. Yeah.
Garner sympathy, right? Over the next 2 days, they went shopping, relaxed on the beach, and visited each other's motel rooms. Lois even took a few pictures with her new friend, and they met another woman, Peggy Houlihan, who played guitar. They all sat around singing songs, typically near the pool or wherever. And that also shows she's willing to take pictures of people, post it to social media during this time, knowing that she's a wanted fugitive.
Wanted by the U.S. Marshal Service.
And is on the news. Wild. But after a while, Peggy felt like something was a little off. She figured maybe the women were lovers, meaning Isabel and Lois, the way that Lois flirted with Isabel. And Lois had also expressed that she wanted Isabel to stay longer than she had planned. So she actually did. She convinced her, just like she had convinced Pam to stay a little bit longer. But luckily, she left before Lois could do anything to her. It seemed like many of the people Lois chose to spend time with were very similar to Pam. Many were middle-aged women who were vacationing alone, but in South Padre Island, she didn't kill any of them, and many would be completely shaken after learning her true identity and realizing they might have been one of her victims. That'd be a very sobering moment to realize that. On April 19th, Lois drove Pam's Acura over to Dirty Al's, and the manager, George Higginbottom, thought he recognized her from watching CBS This Morning. He doubted himself, but then he confirmed Lois's identity by seeing what car she was driving in the parking lot, so he then called the police.
She's still driving Pam's Acura. Which, it's seemingly to be more and more clear that she's
just like, whatever,
she's like, let's just see how far I get here.
Yeah. Keep drinking margaritas at Dirty Al's until they come get me. So luckily the police didn't have to look very far for her, and Lois had made her way over to just the next restaurant called the Sea Ranch. Officers spotted the Acura and secured the building from the outside, and several U.S. Marshals entered and surrounded Lois, who had found a corner seat at the bar, and this was apparently her favorite spot, was always the corner seat at the bar. She silently complied with the officers' orders as they zip-tied her, which was odd for the U.S. Marshals arresting her since many fugitives on the run often resist arrest. She was kind of
she just let it happen, which says a lot too.
Yeah, exactly. But finally, after about 6 weeks since she had killed her husband, Dave, Lois was finally under arrest. She got a 6-week vacation after all this.
All because Dodge County did not look after, didn't even keep eyes on her.
Yeah, it's a bummer. So here's actually a clip of Lee County Sheriff Carmine Marcino after Lois's arrest. This was the guy that we were talking about earlier.
This case from the very beginning struck me as odd. We look at her appearance. She looks like anybody's mother or grandmother, yet she's an absolute cold-blooded murderer We cannot thank not only the U.S. Marshals, our federal partners, Dodge County, Minnesota, Sheriff Rose, our guys, our detectives right now on the ground, working with them to obviously want to bring her back to Florida here, Fort Myers, so she can face those charges. I can tell you there is no I in team, so I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Marshals. And this is a great, great example of what we do every day in law enforcement to show that nationally we come together and we win. So today's a huge win. She can't strike again. That was our main concern. We bring a killer off the streets.
By the next day, several law enforcement officers from different jurisdictions across country had arrived to where she was jailed. With Lois under arrest, they took DNA swabs and obtained warrants to search the Acura and room 227 at the Motel 6. In there, they found a map, a brochure from the Lucky Eagle Casino, various pill bottles, and piles of clothes, including the disguise used to assume Pam's identity at the bank. They found various items she had taken from the Marina Village condo, including soap, tissues, and even a towel. They also found condoms, Pam's checkbook, 4 credit cards, and $548 in cash. In a black go bag, they found bullets, a gun holster, duct tape, rubber gloves, and a Smith & Wesson 9mm, and the gifted Colt Woodsman .22 caliber handgun from her late father. So she's armed, dangerous, ready to go, possibly thinking about doing more murders or crimes.
Right? The fact she had duct tape in the go bag too, like
take a hostage possibly.
Yeah, do you think she was like considering? She must have been considering more crimes after this. I don't think you pack and have that go bag ready if you aren't at least considering doing, you know,
you're going to do
crimes
something
or
with
murders
that.
or
Right.
something. Yeah.
One last thing they found was Pam Hutchinson's sunglasses wrapped in a hand towel. Law enforcement considered this a trophy for her.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. It seems like law enforcement really thought that she may have gone on and murdered other people.
Serial killer, yeah.
Headed that way.
Because that is really disturbing, because if they're, you know, they're in this bag wrapped in a towel, so she's not like wearing them, right?
She's preserving them.
She's preserving them. That's super disturbing. Yeah.
Back up in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, the small town quickly became the center of attention, because a murder like this hadn't happened in Blooming Prairie in decades. One reporter, Kay Fate, compared just how shocking and memorable this event was. She compared it to the Challenger disaster, which is
crazy.
Fucking wild.
Yeah, but I believe it when she says that. I mean, yeah, this was the talk of the town. Not even
I was
hyperbole.
like, can you believe this, Lois?
Yeah, right.
What?
Yeah.
And of course, the media, you know, they're quick to give Lois nicknames. You know, this started making headlines. You know, they have grandmother on the run, losing streak Lois, or killer granny, which isn't untrue.
No.
But the news came as a shock to many, even those who are aware of the problems within Lois and Dave's marriage. It's also very rare for women to commit murder compared to men. In the U.S. in 2023, there were 1,898 female murder offenders compared to 14,327 men.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, and women serial killers is even a smaller percentage than that. Forensic psychologists also struggled to understand Lois's psychological profile since she was such an outlier. It's unclear if her gambling addiction was her true motive, and if that was her motive, that puts her in an extremely small category of murderers who kill to fulfill their gambling addiction.
I've never heard that in my life, really.
Plus, statistically, it's more likely for gambling addicts to be violent toward themselves. Roughly 1 in 5 gambling addicts have seriously contemplated or attempted to take their own life, according to the National Council on Problem Gambling. Gambling addiction is often misunderstood and has few resources and less help, and is extremely stigmatized, especially in small towns like Blooming Prairie.
Yeah.
So along with the gambling addiction, Lois's mental illness was also put under the spotlight. From her family history and Dave's mentioning of her depression to the police when she went missing in 2016, many figured there was more going on underneath the surface. In a court appearance, Lois later acknowledged that she had been taking medication for a, quote, mental condition, but did not specify what condition. When looking at the case, John Fabian, a forensic and clinical neuropsychologist who has examined nearly 700 murder cases, considered bipolar disorder as a contributing factor to her crimes. he proposed that Lois might have been experiencing an acute manic psychotic episode, which is interesting.
Yeah. So Lois appeared in a federal district court on December 17th, 2019, and to avoid the death penalty, she pled guilty to the first-degree murder of Pam Hutchinson. She also pled guilty to lesser charges of grand theft of a motor vehicle and other property and criminal use of personal identification information of a deceased individual. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She was also ordered to pay $38,556 in attorney fees and other expenses. And in a later interview, she was asked about what happened when she murdered Pam. She said, quote, "It truly is a puzzle, and I don't have all the memories and all the answers for that." As for the murder trial over Dave Riess's murder, it was delayed due to COVID-19. The pretrial hearing took place on August 11th, 2020. At a Minnesota high school to allow more spectators than the usual courtroom could due to COVID restrictions. So Lori Traub, Lois's court-appointed public defender, had worked out a deal, and Lois, just like the previous case, pled guilty to first-degree murder and accepted life without parole. But this caveat was that she would serve her time in Minnesota to be closer to family instead of Florida. Her two oldest children, Bill and Bria, and their spouses sat in the school auditorium's front rows for the hearing. Lois hadn't seen them in 2 years and 5 months. Her youngest, Braden, did not attend. Braden reportedly struggled with depression and with substance abuse, and he was actually later found deceased in his truck in a friend's driveway on November 9th, 2021 at 35 years old. It was ruled an overdose, and friends and family acknowledged that the circumstances of his father's murder by his mother had significantly contributed to his burden. But during this hearing, if we backtrack before this, Lois pled guilty and told the court how she had killed Dave. So, according to her, on Sunday, March 11th, 2018, she and Dave had just gone to their grandson's basketball game in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Lois wanted to stay with her family and hang out for a few hours, but Dave wanted to leave, so they left and ended up arguing on the drive home. Even after they got home, the arguing continued all the way into their bedroom. So according to Lois, Dave then went to the dresser and pulled a loaded handgun out. He offered it to her saying, quote, "Why don't you just kill yourself? Maybe you'll get it right this time." She then took the gun, aimed it at her husband's chest, and fired twice. She said in court, quote, "He was right in front of me, and I looked at him in the heart and shot him." Once she realized he was dead, she got down on the floor next to him and then closed his eyes.
So that's according to her.
All according to her. I don't know if I believe her, but I do want to point out that the reason that there are maybe some gaps in this case, or not like really specific details, like we don't know her mental health history and things like that, is because these cases didn't go to trial. She very upfront, they went to just plead guilty so we can get out of the death penalty, and then just plead guilty so that we can move you to Minnesota.
Yep.
So, and normally in cases where you go through a full-blown trial, you get really detailed
We'd have had a ton more information.
Right. But in this case, it's just, she did it, she confessed, and all we have is, the information that the police reports have, basically.
Yep. There were still victim impact statements, though. A social worker read Dave's elderly mother's statement. She wrote, quote, "When you killed David, you took my heart. David was this family's ray of sunshine. I will never forgive you." Dave's sister Cindy said her brother died, quote, "just so a cold-blooded murderer could satisfy her gambling addiction, and that she left him laying dead while she partied and gambled just like before." Lois and Dave's firstborn Bill said, quote, "You stole something from us we'll never get back. I'll never be able to forgive you. The hurt you caused my kids, your grandkids. God, they loved you so much." Lois's daughter, Bria, said, quote, "Losing my dad at the hands of my mom is something I'll never be able to process. If I could go back in time to make sure my mom got the help she needed and never killed my dad, those are thoughts that constantly haunt me." The judge gave Lois a mandatory life sentence without parole and set aside the felony theft charge. In Lois's final statement, she said, quote, "What I did is an unpardonable crime. Solitude is forever. I feel I deserve this. I will have no reprieve. My life without David is my sentence. my penance. Our children are loving, caring, strong people. It's because of David's strengths they are that way. My best accomplishment was having our children. She then apologized to Dave's family and friends for, quote, taking him from you. She then turned to her children and said, quote, I feel I need to say this. I didn't know how much pain I was in until I wasn't anymore. She did not clarify what her, quote unquote, pain was exactly. And as she exited the court, she put her hand over her heart and mouthed, I love you to her children. Lois apologized to Pam Hutchinson's family in that HBO 2-part series, I'm Not a Monster, The Lois Riess Murders, which again, we highly recommend you go watch after listening to this episode, just so you can really hear a lot of these things from her directly. But this was also the first time she has ever appeared for an interview. She did take a moment to express shame and regret for her crimes and the pain she had caused, especially to her own family. Pamela Hutchinson was laid to rest on May 26, 2018, and her family scattered her ashes in the Atlantic Ocean. David Riess is buried at the Minnesota State Veterans Cemetery, and his grave is often decorated by friends and family with gone fishing mementos. Lois Riess, on the other hand, is currently 63 years old and incarcerated at the Women's Minnesota Correctional Facility, Shakopee, where she is serving her 2 concurrent life sentences. So there you have it.
Yeah.
That is the story of Lois Riess. You know, and it's a lot to process.
Yeah, this is a one-of-a-kind case. I don't think we've ever covered anything like this before.
When looking at, one of the things I like to do with a lot of these cases, especially documentaries, is kind of go peruse Reddit and see
other people's
thoughts. And people are pretty brutal on Lois.
Good. I mean, I think it's warranted.
Deserving. Yeah.
You know, you can sympathize with her. Addiction is awful. And like we said earlier, you know, especially gambling addiction is this thing that's really stigmatized, even more so than I think. I don't know, even personally, like I think I can understand a chemical substance abuse, substance addiction more so than I can a gambling addiction. Just because one is, I don't know. To me, it's like, of course, chemicals affect your brain.
Yeah.
They want you to physically have a dependency on them. That's how they work. That's how they've worked forever. But like explaining a gambling addiction in the same context that it's also adding this dependency and it's doing things, you're getting the dopamine from it, you're getting adrenaline from it. You know, it just makes you feel like the highest highs when you hit that jackpot. It's hard to equate the two, right? Because they don't seem similar, but they are in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I don't know, at least for me, it's hard to understand gambling addiction on the same level as like a substance addiction.
Well, it affects you in a different way too.
Yeah.
With substances, you know, it's affecting your wallet as well. But in this way, it's kind of doing a twofold on you with gambling, right? Because you're spending money to gamble. Then when you lose that money, you then are under this perception that if I just continue gambling, I'll make that money back.
Which is
whereas
very different.
Substances, you consume the substances,
that money's gone.
The money's gone, and then you just get more. But it kind of is this weird like spiral that you get trapped in, where you're constantly trying to make the money back that you lost, which therefore justifies the gambling to continue. And it's this vicious cycle that continues and continues.
Because an addict doesn't see it as like, oh, I just blew all the money on a future family car that, you know, my husband was saving up for. Oh, I can just win it back and everything will be okay again. Yeah, it's disgusting because the addiction fools you into thinking that you can correct the addiction by continuing to do it.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just watching John Oliver last week tonight. He did one of his main segments a couple weeks ago was on sports betting.
Dude,
and just how out of control that's getting.
That's evil.
And how it's like trapping the youth and it's trapping people. And now, and this whole idea how they're making it easier and easier to do sports betting and how you can literally bet on anything,
the election,
and it's on your phone.
Yep.
it used to be you had to drive, to go to the sports betting, place to place your bets. Now it's so instantaneous.
I didn't see the John Oliver, although shouts out John Oliver, but I did see the Adam Ruins Everything guy did a YouTube video on sports betting, and all the information he was pulling was really disturbing. Things like at any point, what's the big one? DraftKings. Yeah. They'll just like ban your account if you make too much money and you're actually winning. They're like, well, we don't want you on our platform anymore. More, you're done. But the people that are losing money, it's like you could just keep going forever.
Yeah. Well, on the John Oliver segment, he was showing this interview of this woman who had won through one of the apps. She had won this big winnings. I forget the amount it was. It was a substantial amount of money, and she never got the money. And when she reached out to, I believe it was like DraftKings or something like that. She reaches out to their customer service about like, hey, how come I haven't received my winnings yet? She went back and forth with them. And then finally they responded and said, we basically had a glitch in our system and didn't get any of it.
No.
Which is what, like, literally scamming you, like cheating you out of it. And they have all the power, and it's such a, oh man, I've only done it a handful of times, but every time I've done it, I just always feel like this is a scam.
Yeah. I once I've only gambled a handful of times at like the casino, but, I remember I got DraftKings because my old roommate was trying to get me into it, and I was like, it was the Lions were doing really well, so I was like, oh, I'll put some money on the Lions or something. But then I was having trouble like connecting my bank account, and I was like, maybe this is a sign from the divine that I should not do this, because I've been against gambling for like a long. Look, I'm not a prude. All right, go have fun if you want to have fun. I love
go play some blackjack.
Yeah, I love cards. I love Texas Hold'em. It's one of my favorite games ever. I don't really
penny slots.
Yeah, do it up if you want to, but know that, like, especially with DraftKings, especially sports betting specifically, is such a predatory business. And the fact that you can just make up bets, have you seen that? Like, you can just create bets that don't even really, like, it's like you're not buying into this like pool that's established. You're kind of just like, oh, if the Detroit Lions and the Tigers. The Detroit Lions make it into the playoffs and the Tigers make it into the World
parlays,
Series. Yeah, you can do shit like that.
Well, the parlays, I think, are this new thing, because put $5 in, you could win $800.
A ton, yeah.
So everybody gets sucked into the parlays, but the amount of times people actually win parlays, the percentages are
so small.
And it's all designed that way on purpose. Right. It creates the illusion that, oh, I could win all this money, but all these things have to go exactly right. And the chances they do are so slim to none.
Small,
and I mean, I kind of look at it from like, my dad was a mathematician, and he, him and I have talked about this before, and he was like going over the odds and everything. He's like, I never got into it because the odds are just not
so bad.
Favor at all.
Right.
And this is coming from somebody. I was born in Vegas, and I love Vegas, but when I go to Vegas, I stay away from the gambling, because I could see myself getting, especially at the casinos.
Oh yeah,
it's
the
fun.
Bright lights.
Yeah,
the
it's
sounds,
totally fun.
Yeah,
especially
they're feeding you drinks.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
There's no windows. Yeah,
but if I do it, I'm like, I'm gonna set a limit for myself. I'm only gonna withdraw this much money.
That's what I do. Yeah.
But with the apps, dude, you could hook up your credit card. You could hook up your bank account.
Yeah,
and then before you know it, you don't even know how much money. It's one thing to withdraw cash from an ATM.
Yeah.
And do that over and over again. You might be a little more self-aware of that, but just hooking a card or bank account to your
absolutely
app, forget about it. It's too easy, dude, to hit.
Yeah, it's an evil industry. And also, I mean, there's a saying, the house always wins, right? But people just ignore that. Also, everyone I know who's ever won money in gambling, they're always like, damn, I won like $5,000 off this bet. But they'll never tell you when they lose or how much they lose. They will only tell you when they win.
Right.
And I find that as like, it's almost like a word of mouth marketing technique where it's like, I just won a ton of money. But it's always quiet as a mouse when people lose money. So you'll never hear about people losing money, except in cases where it's egregious.
Yeah. But it's a very serious addiction that can completely destroy lives. Yeah. And like the statistics show, in a lot of cases, people end up taking their own life.
Yeah, that's incredibly sad.
as difficult as the gambling addiction is, obviously the murder aspect to this, the fact that she was willing to go that far.
Yeah.
And I don't know her story about what happened with David. I don't know if that fully checks out.
Yeah.
Could it have been a moment that she snapped and then maybe it just spiraled from there? Sure. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like based on her actions prior and the fact she's taken money from other people and she knows Dave has access to money. She doesn't have her own money anymore. So she has to use his money, and she does need to feed this addiction that she has. And he's stopping her from doing it. So that's motive, obviously, to do that. But, as far as her relationship goes and the prior verbal abuse, I think that's all, I don't want to discount that because I think that's definitely something that could have gone on. And it sounds like other people, although some of her family members are like, we didn't necessarily see that. It seemed like he was, I guess it depends on if you knew him personally, how you would maybe, like some of us might hear some of the things that Dave says and be like, that's verbal abuse. But to them, it's just kind of the way that they sort of talk to each other. And so it's, I don't want to cast judgment on that because it could have absolutely been a toxic marriage, but then get divorced, you don't need to murder your spouse. Get divorced.
She talks about that in the docuseries, but it's kind of like a non-issue. She's just like, oh no, divorce isn't an option. Like my parents stayed together through thick and thin, even though that marriage sounded awful too. And then it's just kind of just you move on from that. And I don't know, it seemed like it was brushed under the rug, where divorce is absolutely an option. And I think maybe there's some finances at stake there, at least in her mind, where it's like, no, if I divorce him, well, that's where my funnel of money is coming from. So maybe she wasn't being quite honest about why it wasn't an option. She made it seem like it was this, no, you're devoted. But I'm like, no, I think it's because your one source of money is Dave.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if it was a heat in the moment murder out of passion, she still murdered Pam.
Yeah, that's
later.
The thing.
Like it's whether or not this was one mistake, she made the same quote unquote mistake again.
Yeah.
So does it really matter what the first reason was? Because she killed someone else in cold blood.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes you believe her less.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right? You're like, oh, you're just manipulating me right now. You probably did just murder him in cold blood because you wanted his money and you were clearly planning to some extent on what your next move was going to be after.
Yeah. And we talked about that a little earlier where we thought like, oh yeah, you can kind of sympathize with her story. And I think she knows this too, up until the point where she kills Pam. Because you're like, oh, could this have been like a really weird abusive dynamic and terrible marriage? Sure. But then, yeah, when Pam comes into the mix, a completely innocent woman who didn't deserve any of this, and even by anyone's story, even by her own story, her only excuse is, oh, I can't really remember.
Yeah, I blacked out. Yeah, sure.
So even she can't even make up a reliable excuse about any of the things that happened with Pam. So I think Pam does indicate something about the initial murder as well.
Yeah, and I think the underlying issue that we all can clearly see is there's serious mental health issues there. I mean, just based on the family history and what we know, there's other factors in that department that absolutely contributed to this.
Yeah, definitely.
All happening. And as we've seen in so many cases we've covered on the show, it's when those things are involved, people can do the unthinkable. And then you combine the gambling, you combine the relation, it's kind of a perfect storm of things all going on at the same time. And I think she just kind of.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to ask you though, to backtrack a bit. Do you think there's anything legitimate about that acute manic psychotic episode theory that one forensic psychologist mentioned could have been a contributing factor?
I think so, but again, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I mean, she's very difficult because when you hear her talk, when you hear her explain things, that the two are difficult to line up next to each other.
Yeah.
And again, You know, if she's in an episode, that's a different thing. But it's, I don't know. I think it's definitely possible, but I can't for sure say one way or another. I think there's just a lot we don't know. I think if we had more information around, you know, what she's been diagnosed with, I think it'd be easier to. But if you're going off of his sort of professional opinion, I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like I was saying, you know, without the trials, you don't get all the experts to come in and rigorously go through someone's past. So without that, we're going to be left with some questions in this case for sure. And even with Lois's interview, it's still just like, I think at the end of the day, I think she's a liar. She comes across, and they kind of catch her on some lies in the interview, and she can't really explain herself sometimes. And I don't know. She's also had enough time to make up really convenient stories, you know, just
lots
sitting
of time
around all day, you know.
And to get in front of cameras, I think in her mind, she's like, ooh, perfect opportunity to win sympathy from people.
For sure.
And I think that's what she thought was going to happen. But by all the reviews and people's opinions on Reddit and stuff, it seems like nobody believes her.
It didn't work out in your favor.
Not convincing enough. And again, what about the victims? You know, that doesn't, you did what you did. And I appreciate she at least owns up to that she owns up that I did these things. Although she does kind of try to like, cast
Pam's, she's like, oh, I blacked
out, and I guess that's what happened. And it's like, no, dude, you know what happened. Stop trying to minimize it.
She was crying for 13 minutes afterwards.
Right, yeah. And they do press her. Oh, good on the interviewers, because they do press her on those questions like that, and she just can't really explain herself any more than just some bullshit answer, you know?
I'm not a monster.
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
You know, it's the classic wolf in sheep's clothing. You know, it's
a wolf in grandma's clothing.
Yeah. Yep.
YouTube title.
Yeah. Yeah. And was she always this way? Was this always within her? Was this a byproduct of something else?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard when you go back to the very beginning and her as a mother, and, you know, and, is this just something that built up over time, or was this a recent mental health, well, you know, issue that came up that's just spiraled out of control? She was on medication. We don't know for what. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a mystery, because there's just a lack of information there. But I think at the end of the day, she got a very fair punishment for the crimes that she did. And there's some people close to this case who prefer that she'd been on death row for this.
Yeah.
Because they're, you know, it's a classic argument of why should we pay for her, you know, to be on death row, which, again, if you know anything about death row, people usually are on death row for a while.
Yeah.
A hot minute. So
I think also statistics show that the appeals process for someone on death row is actually more expensive than just keeping them in prison for life.
And I think for her, it's almost better that she has to think about this every day,
definitely.
You know? And maybe she can find a way to contribute in a positive way from prison. You know, I mean, they let her do this documentary.
That's wild.
Which is pretty wild for such a high profile.
And I'm not sure if something happened in between, but then they were having to do kind of interviews by phone call. Like, they couldn't always schedule her in. But I was shocked that they're taking someone who's, you know, convicted of 2 murders, that they even got her on camera, is pretty wild to me.
But she's definitely, if you judge a book by its cover, I think we'd all be like, what?
A little fooled. Yeah.
Really? She did all this?
Mm-hmm.
That's surprising.
I agree. Yeah. Middle-aged grandma. Yeah. It doesn't really track.
I mean, she looks like somebody, you know, similar type person that we all have in our lives. And it's all, you know, it's like the greatest mystery with, you know, people who seemingly start from a fairly normal place and then end up in this. Is like, how did things go so bad? And I don't think even she fully knows how things got this way. You know? It's all it takes is starting with one mistake, you know, and then from there it spirals out of control. But was that what happened with her, or was that always just part of the plan? I don't know.
Yeah. It's a confounding case, because a lot of serial killer episodes that we do, it's like okay, we got sexual gratification, They have a very specific profile for their victims. They have a very specific MO. But then it comes to Lois Riess, and you're just like, we don't really even know the exact motive. Her MO is kind of similar, like in the way that she kills them, but her victims are two completely different people. Then we're just like, well, was she going to kill more? We think so, but maybe not. But then she kind of kept a trophy of her second victim. So
yeah, stuff's in her go bag. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it's definitely a very rare case that you don't come across very often. I mean, it's just rare to find female killers in general, especially serial killers. I mean, it's just, there's very few of them. But this one had me kind of on the edge of my seat from start to finish.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, where's this going to go? Where's this going to go?
Yeah.
And not surprised of where it ended. But yeah, we definitely want to know your thoughts for sure. And again, check out the Max series if you've got Max, because it is very interesting, and hearing her interviewed will just add a lot of good context to this episode. But yeah, drop us a comment, let us know your thoughts on all the things discussed. But that is going to be it for us today. As always, thanks for joining us for another episode of Lights Out. If you enjoy the podcast, give it a like, give us a subscribe, hit that follow button, just helps out. Hit us with a review. We appreciate those too. But we'll see you guys next time. Until then, lights out, everybody. Everybody. Everybody.